Hey guys, and welcome to another Top 10. Yes, it's about time I got back to these as well following my Essen trip. I'm quite behind actually. I've got lots of ideas, I've got lots of lists in the works, and you know, Patreon have voted on which ones they want to see, and it's like, oh yeah, I'm really gonna move on and actually put some of these out. So this is one that I've wanted to do for some time, because one of the biggest bugbears I have at any game night, any game club, any convention is when you end up with that dreaded number of 5 players. I hate it. Most games, well, there are loads of 2-player games, loads of excellent 2-player games. Most games work brilliantly with 3 players. It's my ultimate sweet spot. 4, most games cater for 4 players. You're usually okay with that. And then when you get to 5 and plus, it's harder to find great games that work with that number of players. 6, you can split the group up into 2 groups of 3 and do it. Or there are games that work with 6 or more, but they tend to be the party games. 5 is kind of odd. You don't want to split it with a 2-player and a 3-player game on a game night because you want to mingle with everyone, you want everyone to be involved. And 2-player games don't tend to take as long as a lot of the other group games unless you've got something mammoth size like Star Wars Rebellion or War of the Ring. Or Through the Ages maybe. But it's really fiddly to do with 5 for party games because some party games don't work as well with only 5. You sometimes want a bigger group. Things like Deception, Murder in Hong Kong and Spyfall and possibly even Dixit, you know, you sort of think 5's okay, but I would like maybe a little bit more. And so 5 is just such a horrendous number to work with. I hate the number 5. So just that number in general I hate. Unless it's got a pound sign before it, it's in my hand, that's a different story. But yeah, it's just a nightmare. So what I've done with this list is I've tried to come up with my top 10 games that I will play that play well with 5 players. Not necessarily best with 5 players, but play well with 5 players. And you know, some of these I've had to give honourable mentions, which some of you might disagree with, so I'll get onto those later. But yeah, generally I think I got a good list of games which, if you give me 5 players, I'd be happy to play these games with them. Now, there are 1 or 2 caveats. The main one, though, actually, let's see, is there more caveats in this? No, actually, I think generally, it's mainly just the case that I've tried to avoid filler or party games. Party games, you know, most people could argue that they sort of work well with 5 anyway, so I've kind of excluded them. And I've also excluded fillers, you know, stuff that's like 30 minutes or less, so you won't see things like Sushi Go or Celestia or Not Alone, that kind of thing, because they're fillers. Most of those games work with 5. It's not difficult to find a game that works with them. So I figured, you know, if you're going to play with 5, yeah, you can do fillers and you can do party games, but I'm trying to find 10 main games, you know, like your main game of the night. And this is what you want to play, and you've got 5 of you. So see what you think. You know, I think this could be a good one for debate. I want to hear your thoughts, so get them in the comments below after you've watched the video. Okay, kicking off with my number 10. This is a game that I don't tend to get to the table often, but it works with a fair wide category of players. But if you play it with 5, and I think it even goes up to 6, it makes for a very good sort of stock training game for entry level. And that's this one up here, which I don't, like I say, you wouldn't think I would like this, but oh no, it only goes up to 5. Airlines Europe. This one works surprisingly well with 5 players. It's effectively Ticket to Ride mixed with an element of stock trading. You're placing these little airplanes on the board and connecting routes. You get points for connecting cities in certain cases. But what you're trying to do is you're trying to inflate the value of each airline. And if you're holding shares in that airline, then great, your shares are worth more. But if you don't hold that many, then maybe you don't want to help someone else. It's a fairly simple entry-level stock market trading game, and I don't tend to go for this genre. But this is one of the few exceptions where I think this is nice, it's straightforward, it's not burdened by the whole stock trading thing, it's just a nice, pleasant game. And with 5 of you, it still works pretty well. It's not a slow game, you've got more airlines being used, you've got more activity with the shares themselves and the airlines, like more people influencing the prices of them, and it just tends to work quite well. It's low on the list mainly just because I'm trying to balance how good it is with 5 players versus my enjoyment playing the game. This one is something that probably wouldn't end up in my top 100 ever, but it's still a solid game. And like I say, with 5, I can pull out this one and generally still have a good time. Airlines Europe. My number 5 is from the Dice Tower Essentials line, and this is with the caveat, and I suppose you could say this about most of the games on my list, caveat that you avoid AP players. But as long as you avoid those people who take games too seriously, you should be able to have good fun with this relatively underrated title from the Dice Tower Essentials line. You probably think I'm going to mention Sheriff of Nottingham. No, that didn't make the list. It was a mention, but it crossed that line of, is this a negotiation game or is it a party game? I don't know. And so I wasn't keen on putting it on the list for that reason. Also, sorry, with 5 players, it tends to go a bit long even with the timer. This one, however, Viral, plays from 2 to 5 and works very well with 5. You know, again, get the AP player out of the way, but you are basically playing viruses invading a human's body. You know, they're in the hospital getting treated and you're trying to effectively play an area control game through the various organs, trying to get your viruses to dominate the various places and get victory points. It plays very swiftly over, I think, something like, how many rounds? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I forget the number of rounds, but I think it's like you only play about 6, 7 rounds in total by the time the game ends. And it's done with a cool little card sort of a hand management system where you play cards in order to do various actions, but you don't get those cards back until a round later. So you have to think, well, I'll play those now, do without them, and then I'll play these cards, and then I'll get those back later. And you'll buy more cards, which are upgraded, and they're more interesting. And it's a very cool area control game with a funny theme. I mean, it's got some good theme in it. Like, if you get too dominant in a particular, over the course of the game, the doctors outside basically treat you and like flush out most of your viruses. And if too much activity takes place in one particular organ, the natural defenses basically kick a bunch of viruses out. It's done very well. Looks really great on the table. It's nice and colourful, nice and light in terms of its theming and complexity. But even with the max number of 5 players, it still plays relatively quickly, and having 5 players gunning for control over those like different organs makes for a very frustrating in a good way, but a very heated battle for the various organs with 5 of you. So I find that Viral still works at that player count. Most of these sort of games that go from 2 to 5, especially area control, I'm like, oh, I don't know, it's probably too mean, it's going to go on too long. This one does a pretty good job of keeping things to a decent level without letting it get too serious, too cutthroat, or certainly too punishing or anything like that. Great game. Viral deserves a bit of extra buzz because it really isn't getting it at the moment. My number 8, and I apologise in advance, my throat dehydrates very quickly, so if I find myself having to cough a bit, sorry, but I gotta get these videos out despite. My number 8 is a game that I tend to rave about quite a bit. I put it on my underrated games list and I feel that it deserves a bit more buzz. Granted, I can see why it doesn't get a lot of buzz because negotiation games aren't always liked by a lot of people. Personally, I love them. I love a good negotiation game. Getting like, you know, getting in people's heads, manipulating them, trying to, you know, tell the truth, get them on your side or lie to them so that they'll think falsely of what your true intentions are. I love a good negotiation game. This one, set in the Netrunner universe, is one that I've raved about quite a bit. Oop, there goes Hanabi. And that is New Angeles. Yes, I really enjoyed this one. It's a long negotiation game. We're talking like 3 hours you could be playing a typical game of this. But you're engaged throughout. There is no downtime in this. You're constantly listening to the debates, constantly thinking about whether you should make a counteroffer or not. Whose side should you be on? Do I want this to happen? What are the ramifications of that? Maybe I should let this happen, but then I'm giving him that asset. That's quite a powerful thing. And then you're trying to think, who's your rival? You've got to get more money, wealth, than your rival. And it's like, well, I know my rival, but who's my rival? Who am I trying to be? And on top of this, you've even got a traitor federalist character who wants the whole city to tank. And you're trying to figure out who they are so you don't help them out too much. Plenty of stuff to think about in this game, and your brain will be fried by the time it's done. But it plays 4 to 6 players. 6 is definitely the best number to play with this, because you use every corporation as well as the traitor. 5 still works fine. 4, not as big a fan of, but 5 works fine. You leave out 1 corporation, not a huge hit. It just means that it changes the dynamic of the game slightly depending which one you leave out. 6 is obviously the best, but if you give me 5 and they say, you know, we like New Angeles, we want to play and it's just 5 of us, great, I'll happily throw it out. Maybe it'll even take a little bit less than 3 hours. But yeah, it doesn't get as much love. It came out sort of January, which for movies and games seems to be like the graveyard of when it comes to releases. But I feel like this one needs a little bit more love. You know, it's up to you whether you care about the Netrunner universe or not, or whether negotiation games are your thing, or whether you even want to play a negotiation game for as long as this one does. But for me, 5 players, this works solidly. My number 7, you might argue this is a party game. I personally don't think of it as a party game because you've got the cooperative nature of it. And as soon as you put there's a victory condition, that you're all working together, I don't see how it's a party game. And you can play this with, you know, 2-3 players if you want. You don't have to play it with up to 7 as it can take. And at player counts, I find it works well at pretty much all the player counts. But certainly if I've got that horrible number 5, this will be one of those co-op games where I think, you know what, I would like to bring this one out. And like I say, you can shout at me if you think this is a party game, but I think that there's enough about Mysterium that means it kind of detracts from that. And bear in mind, I didn't put Sheriff of Nottingham on here, and I didn't put Dixit on here. But this one is essentially co-op Dixit. You have the one player playing the Ghost, and everyone else playing the Psychic Investigators, and the Ghost is giving those Dixit-style artwork cards in order to help the investigators figure out who the murderer, location, and weapon of choice was, much in the same way as Cluedo. It's basically Cluedo with fancy artwork, but it works very well. It's a highly entertaining game, one of my favourites. And granted, maybe it works a bit better with 4, maybe it works pretty well when you've got the full 6, 7, even though it's a longer game, but 5 still is one of the great counts to play it as. It's kind of on that cusp borderline of when it shoots from pretty difficult to very difficult in terms of how many cards you get. It's around that 5-6 player mark. But yeah, you know, I didn't put it stupidly high on the list in case it had that whole contention about, oh, this is a party game, or is it? But personally, I sign up to the camp where it's not. You know, fine if you want to drop it off the list, you can put one of the honourable mentions on here later in its place. But I really enjoy Mysterium. It's not had as much love as it did when it first came out. Some people have been umming and ahhing over it. Personally though, I really love it. I always get a kick out of this game when I play it. It's a great one to teach to new players because they understand Cluedo and they just got to look at fancy artwork, and it's a co-op. So I find it makes for a very good gateway game experience. So yeah, I'm cool with this one, particularly if we've got that horrible number of 5. It's like 1 ghost, preferably me, love being a ghost, and 4 other investigators, goes along at a pretty quick pace. So if you'll allow it on the list, Mysterium, my number 7. My number 6 I don't own. This is one that I've been shown how to play and I've played it a couple of times since. But if you give me 5 players and this is one of the options, I'll be cool with it. Granted, I'll have to bear in mind that it is frustrating as all get out when you have got this whole thing of you know, the like everybody getting in your way, and it is one of those like, oh, I'm gonna kill you type games. It is a stressful game. But Broom Service works very well with 5. In Broom Service, you're playing these cards in order to perform actions, but you don't want to play the same action as another player because then you try to gun for either the good action or the slightly lesser version. If you go for the lesser version, it's nowhere near as powerful, but you at least get to do it. If you play the bigger version, if no one else has played the card, you get to do it. The problem is anybody else played that card? It's a role selection game. You're moving your witches on the map and trying to collect different colour potions in order to deliver them. You know, it's like pick up and deliver in a sense to various places in order to score victory points. So it's a fairly dryish game, but it's nice and colourful, and the role selection is good fun. With less players, you have certain cards that are like negative victory points if you use them. Not as big a fan of that, but I'll play it there none the same. But with 5, I don't know if it goes to 6, I think it might be just 5, I don't know, don't quote me on this. But when you got the higher player count, you don't have that. It's just all the people are there and all the cards are used. And with 5 of you, it is super tense with that whole, oh, I want to do that strong action, but there's 2 more people after me. They haven't played it, but you are, I know you are. I'll do it anyway. I'm going for the strong mountain witch action. Oh, good, you haven't. Good, good, good. No, I am the mountain witch. I'm going to kill you. It's so stressful. But with 5 of you, you get that. Everybody knows that going in, you know, it's just, it's It's anger in a short space of time because the game's not very long. It's not like you're there going, oh god, I'm going to be here for 3 hours constantly stressed. No, it's done and dusted within about 60 minutes. It's a pretty good length for a game. So, Broom service, I don't own it. I'm thinking about getting it in the collection, but for now, I know where I can find a copy if I want to get it played. Works very well though, with 5 players. Number 5 is one of my favourite racing games. In fact, is it my... It might actually be my favourite racing game. But this one with 5 can go on a little long at times, but generally the moves are simultaneous, and with 5 of you there's certainly a lot of contention for blocking each other and getting in people's way, and it makes for a very good tense race. But I adore Snowtails as a game. Play some 2 to 5. 2 is quick, but it's a bit open. 5 of you though, you are fighting for those spaces, you're constantly getting in each other's way, there's a lot of like pulling in from behind, or chops and changes in terms of who's first, second and third place. Works very well. Again, AP players stay away because you'll drag the game out and you don't want it to do that. But it's very simple. You just play cards, manipulate the dogs as to whether they pull you in a straight line faster or drift you to the left and the right. You're limited on what cards you can have, and if you dent your sleigh, it's even more limiting. It's just a barrel of laughs. You just have silly little fun with it. I love husky dogs. I really want to try husky dog sled racing or riding or whatever. I want to go to the Arctic Circle and try it out. I really would love to do that. But for now, I will take a game based on that style of racing. Just good light-hearted fun. And with the maximum count of 5 players, it still works really well. Just nice and simple, turns are simultaneous, it shouldn't drag itself out, but you have a lot of contention on that track. It's not left open, and everybody just has a bit of a rollicking good time. So I really appreciate this one. It's the fact that it can drag a little bit long with 5, depending on the players, is the reason it isn't quite higher. But still, 5 players, I'm currently thinking, Snowtails, probably worth a shot. My number 4 is not necessarily a game I enjoy more than some of the ones I've put on the list before, but if I'm thinking, right, well, I still enjoy it. It's not a top 100 game, but I still enjoy it. But when I've got 5 players, it works fantastically well, and that's what brings it back a little bit to this position on the list. Plays up to 6, but it scales perfectly well from 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 players. It is one of the best games that is out there for player scaling. It looks like a dog's dinner on the table. It looks bland and muted and horrible. The artwork is pretty boring. I'm certainly not giving this one any awards for like colour or components or art or aesthetics or even theme because it's non-existent. But as a super quick 1 hour tops area control game of the basic elements, Ethnos is one that just seems to do the job. It does it so well. So simple are the rules, and the replay value is increased on the basis that you have these different race cards that you play in order to put your markers on the table. But each race has a different ability. Some make it easier to control areas, some make it easier to get big sets of them, some allow you to retain cards, some allow you to infuriate other players. There's some really cool replay value in this because you only use 6 and there's I think 12 in the box and the 13th promo, and they could easily expand this by literally just going, here's a bunch more races. So you get good variety in the game. The game changes dramatically based on what type of races there are. I mean, if you get the elves and the centaurs, you're constantly retaining cards. But if you don't, suddenly you're having to get rid of a lot of these cards. If you've got the halflings, they've got more cards in the deck than any other race, but they don't control areas. You have to get big sets with them. So there's a really cool dynamic with this game and how the races change things up. But 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6, particularly 5 and 6, this works really well, and the turns are still super fast because you basically draw a card or you play a band of allies and put a marker out. That's literally it. The turns can be so quick that before you've even processed what this card you draw means to you, it's already back round. And something like that that can work with 5 players deserves good mention. Not the most enjoyable game I have in my collection. You know, it's kind of like, I think it's decent. But for player scaling, for teaching new players, and just for the fact that you can get it done in an hour with 5 players, works nicely. Ethnos. My number 4, I'm not going to pull out from the other room because it's in the big legendary box and it's packed up with like the Wind Gambit and the Fenris expansion in there, and I'm just going to leave it there for now because I don't want to have to carry it in here. But Scythe, my number 3, works excellently with 5. Granted, I seem to quite like playing it with just 3 or 4, and you can play it with 6 or 7, but you're looking at a much longer game unless everybody knows what they're doing. Saying that, I have played a 7-player game of it in 90 minutes because we all knew what we were doing. That was really good. But 5 is a really solid number for this game. It's one of my favourites. It's a top 10 game for me. But I could easily play this with 3 and 4, get it done in a sort of lower amount of time, and still have a pretty good game of it. But, sorry, my throat, it keeps drying up. But Scythe is a great sort of engine building, resource management game. You're controlling a faction with these mechs and these different action boards, and you've got to basically harvest resources in order to build buildings and build mechs and cover the area control on the map, finding encounters, and the expansions have just made this better and better and better. You've got 2 new factions, you've got airships, you've got variable endgame tiles, and you even in the Fenris expansion, in fact, no, I can't say, spoiler alert, I'm not going to do that, but certainly if you get the Fenris expansion, you get a lot of cool stuff that you can put into your Scythe game to make it even better. One of the best expansions out there. But Scythe in general is just, for me, really an enjoyable game. Granted, it's not for everyone, and I know some people like to hate on Scythe, but personally, I love it. It's been in my top 10, in my overall top 10, I think, what, like twice in a row running, and at most, it will probably maybe fall to the top 20, but even then, I still really love this game. Looks the business, I got the realistic resources and the metal coins, and even got the playmat recently for it. It looks the business, but I get a big kick out of Scythe. And 5 players playing Scythe works very nicely, because if you don't have the 2 bonus factions, then you use the original 5, and you have a nice sort of contention for the board and player control and all the different abilities going forward. So preferably you want only 5 players if everybody knows how to play the game, otherwise it'll be a bit long. But yeah, for me, that's why it's my number 3. Scythe just works really well at 5 and deserves a place on the list. Okay, I gotta be a little bit quick because I noticed the battery is starting to run out on my camera. I really should have charged it up before I did my reviews today. But my number 2, oh yes, I mean, it is, apart from my number 1, obviously, one of the best games I want to pull out for 5 players. It can play up to 6, scales well from 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. It's a great game for player scaling, but because you're doing simultaneous role selection, it works really well. And I'm not talking about citadels here. No, you're taking it in turns to draft those roles. Here, though, it's simultaneous selection, so the turns are still quick. You're still involved, and with 5 of you, you're still doing a lot of area control on the board. Sorry, but with 6, still great. 4, still great. It's the fact that if I've got 5 players, and this is in my bag, this is one of my first recommendations to get on the table, because it doesn't take too long. You're probably talking 60 to 90 minutes. And yet it looks colourful, it's gorgeous, and everybody just has a great time with the reprint of Mission Red Planet. Awesome game, combining my favourite elements out of Citadels with a solid area control game. The different roles are all sort of unique, they've got cool abilities, you have to play a certain card in order to get them back, so you're constantly looking at what the other players have already played, you're timing when to get your astronauts on those ships, timing where they should be on the planet, and you're trying to harvest the various resources for victory points. It's just a very simple but very quick area control game with some role selection involved. You only play 10 rounds, it doesn't take that long, there's only 3 scoring phases, and the roles themselves are similar, but they have some key differences. But as well as looking the part, it just scales phenomenally well, and 5 works perfectly fine with this. You know, I don't have to think, well, it's going to go on a bit long with 5. Nope. I'll happily play this with 6. Works just as great with 6, works with 4, works very well with 5. So this is definitely one you need to grab if 5 is a constant niggle for you, because it will work wonders. Only one game for me taps this. What could it be? And my number 1, yes, my number 1, this one just pits Mission Red Planet, because for both of them it works well, but with this one, the main reason it pips Mission Red Planet is because I can play Mission Red Planet with 3, 4, 6, 2, whatever, and I'll still enjoy it. This game, however, if you've got expansions, you can play with more players, but it will go on a bit long. 3 and 4 isn't quite enough players. 4 is okay, but really the sweet spot for this game is 5. And 5 just works brilliantly with this game, which is why I most likely play this when I have 5 of us. It's another negotiation game. It was Tom Vassal's favourite game. It is still one of my favourite games, and if I can lift this thing, because it is quite heavy, because I've expanded it up the wazoo. Whew! Cosmic Encounter, and this is the 42nd anniversary version of it, where it's not quite closing because unfortunately I had an insert for it bought and forgot that I had one too many expansions for it. But it's still there, I'm just going to be careful with it. But Cosmic Encounter, aliens with tentacles and freaky alien powers, it's brilliant. It's a solid negotiation game, and granted, if negotiation's not your thing, don't play it. But with this, the aliens having different powers that completely change the dynamic of the game, the negotiation aspect of, do you want to ally with me? What? You traitor? Right, well, how about you? Well, fine, be that way. I was like, oh yeah, I'll join this fight on the wrong side, and it's just, oh. You get so many cool stories from this, so many great moments. The alien powers just chop and change things ridiculously, and it's not that complex of a game. You know, the deck tells you who you're fighting, you go and fight, put your ships down, get some allies, and, you know, and then play a card and total up the numbers. That's pretty much it. The main thing that throws a spanner in the works and makes it a little bit more complex is those alien powers, because they are so game-changing. You know, they pretty much take the rules that are set in stone and just jumble them up and say, here you go, now we play like this. But with the expansions I've got, I can now play with up to 8 players, I think. But to be honest, 5 is a great sweet spot, particularly with this revised base set version, because not only do you get the original base 50 aliens, and to be fair, you don't need the expansions for this. I mean, those base 50 aliens are solid and will give you more than enough bang for your buck. But with the new version, you get these cards that give you tailored setups, and they work from, you know, 3, 4, 5 players. But 5 just seems to work really well with them. It tells you what aliens to use, but it gives you a theme to use with them. To that, the added component quality. I mean, the original Fantasy Flight Games version is still really, really good. This one just ups it a little bit better with a slightly better rulebook and translucent ships and that. But, oh, I have great stories with Cosmic Encounter. I love to bring it out as often as I can. Granted, there's only certain people who want to play it because it's a negotiation game. But, oh yeah, love it. Love it, love it, love it. If I've got 5 people, I know that this is a game that will work every single time with that player count. And so much so that I only want to play this with 5 players, which means getting it to the table is kind of hard. But I'll play it with 4, and I'll play it with 6. But 5, oh, it just seems to be that ultimate sweet spot. And I never say that about a game. 5 being a sweet spot? Wow, I mean, that is different from my usual broken record lane of saying 3 is my sweet spot. But yeah. Cosmic Encounter does the job supremely nicely. So, that's it. My top 10 games with 5 players. And there were a few honourable mentions, it has to be said. So, let's see, I got rid of party games. So, I mentioned, let's see, Carson City. Works pretty well with 5. You can play with up to 6. It does make it a bit more cutthroat, and the game does drag on a bit long though. So, I'll play it with 5, but it can go on a bit. Shadows of a Camelot, I thought about that one, but I don't know. With Shadows, I think it would be like a kind of maybe 12, 13, but I like having the full amount of players with that full 6 and 7 when you've got all the Knights of the Round Table playing that game. It just seems to work really well, but yeah, I still give it credit. With 5, it works fine. Dixit was a party game, so no. Lords of Waterdeep I had on there, but I kind of discounted it because I think with 5 it just goes on too long for what it is. So I'm not a big fan of that one with 5. Isle of Skye, considered it. It takes 1 round off the timer, so it adds, you know, it makes the game not drag out too much. But 5 can still drag things out in terms of downtime, and so I'm not as keen to play it with 5. And after a quick change of clothes, not to mention a change of camera battery, we actually get onto my Patreon choice for this list. And there were some good suggestions, but the most popular one that I came across was one that I did consider, but I took it off the list, and I'll get onto that in a second. I can actually get the game out for you, and I suspect it probably was the same for you guys as well. Gotta be careful, there's an insert in here. 7 Wonders. this box is really getting worn out. Yeah, Seven Wonders was the most popular of the Patreon choices, and I did consider it. But I didn't feel like it deserved a place, and here's why. I will play Seven Wonders with 5 players. I will not really want to play it with 6 or 7. I much prefer to play it with 3 or 4. And, I mean, like I say, you could probably still put this maybe like closer to 20 in my list for 5 players. But here's the thing, and this is the same with all drafting games. Depending on how many cards you have, when you have a certain number of players, you get to the point where you might as well look at your hand, pick a card, and then just scrap the rest. You know you're never going to see them again. What Seven Wonders has is a similar thing, because normally you're only looking at 7, maybe 8 cards. So with 5 of you, you're looking at your hand, and unless you're playing with an expansion, you're looking at 7 cards, and 2 of them may come back round to you. Unlikely, but you could gamble on it. And then after the first couple of turns of drafting, that's it. Whatever you see is what you get. But when you have less players, there's more scope for you to go, right, well, I want that card. There's a good chance this one might come back round, especially if there's 3 or 4 of you. You know, with 7 or 8 cards between 3 or 4 of you, there's a good chance that for the first 2 to 3 rounds, the card might come back round to you. And I always like gambling with that in drafting games. The fact that I really want this card, but I really want this as well. Which one do I think is likely to come back round? Probably this one, so I'm going to gun for that. And then you hope, and you know, their intention is like, don't pick it, don't pick it, don't pick it, yay, and you get it back. Or someone puts it down and you're like cursing them forever. But I like that in games, and I feel that a lot of drafting games with 5 players, you lose a bit of that. But it's really on the borderline. It's on the cusp between too many and just right. You know, 6 or 7, I don't like to play Seven Wonders with 6 or 7. I think it's too many people, it drags on a bit, even though it's simultaneous, you still got to wait for people to make decisions. And again, with 7 players playing normal Seven Wonders, you look at the cards, you pick one, and then the rest you just scrap. So it's a bit of it increases the luck, I feel, with the drafting. So that's my only reason that I didn't put this on the list. However, still respect it, and I will still play it with 5 players. So, you know, as Patreon choices go, I think that was a pretty solid one, and I'm sure some of you out there probably agree, because you don't, you know, you feel that maybe I'm wrong on the subject. So that's it for this top 10. Thanks for watching. Like I say, service is resuming. Just bear with me while I've got to A, catch up with all the Essen stuff, and B, learn about 5 courses on Udemy for all the creative suite that I've got. Yes, the Patreon campaign managed to get me to upgrade my Premiere Pro subscription to Creative Cloud. So now I've got all the other bits on there, like Illustrator and After Effects and Photoshop and Lightroom, that sort of thing. Problem is, never used any of them. So I had to do courses. And it was going to be a goal to do courses later on, but I found a cheap, like Udemy had a cheap offer going on with some of their online courses, and I had a Patreon payout recently, so I thought, you know what, let's get some of those courses now. So I've pre-booked a bunch of online courses, one for each of the things, so Photoshop, beginner to pro, you know, Premiere Pro, beginner to expert, or whatever, you know, like basically good masterclass courses, and when I get a chance, I'm going to get through them. I'm going to self-teach myself the software, and hopefully by the end of the year, that should give me enough of a grounding to go, right, Season 3 begins with a brand new look, you know, hopefully like new intro, new, I'm not sure about logo, it depends how good I get, but you know, sort of new intro, some different music, you know, some more stuff, maybe a different format or whatever, but like I say, Season 3, I want to get right on the new software before I release it. I'm debating little ideas here and there, and you might have noticed 1 or 2 changes in my review format recently. So, you know, I'm what's the word? I'm trying to look at other ideas, and I'm testing the waters for now. But like I say, when Season 3 starts, I want it to be ready. Call me a perfectionist. So anyway, that's enough rambling about other stuff. I'll see you on the next review or top 10. See you soon. Take care, and remember, 5 players, even if you are stuck with that amount, just remember, still only a game, so don't fret. Take care, see you soon.